First results are being projected in Canada, where a snap election is being held to determine who will become the country's next Prime Minister. Polls have closed in the Atlantic region, and in just a short while from now, they will close across Canada. And like the United Kingdom, Canada has a first-past-the-post electoral system. What exactly does this mean? Let me break it down for you. The candidate who gets the most votes in each electoral district or riding wins that seat and becomes an MP. The share of votes doesn't have to be a majority, it just has to be one more vote than the second-place candidate. So under the system, a party can actually secure the most seats in the House of Commons without receiving the most votes across the whole country, which is exactly what happened in the last election. You see, back in 2021, the Liberals finished as the largest party by winning 47% of the seats, ahead of the Conservatives on 35%. In fact, what exactly are the key issues that Canada is basing this election on? You must note that the polls this time are seen as the most important election in a generation. It is one of the world's most prosperous nations and America's closest ally and trading partner. And Canada has found itself in recent months unexpectedly in the crosshairs of US President Donald Trump, targeted with tariffs and annexation threats as well. But the country has also seen many of its national accomplishments in regard to the economy and social issues slip, including higher costs of living, higher unemployment, tighter immigration laws, as we've been covering extensively on NDTV, rising housing costs, as well as a surge in homelessness and substance abuse. Many of these problems, not just in Canada, but in other advanced economies, were actually exacerbated by the pandemic, but Canadians are blaming a decade of Liberal Party rule under Justin Trudeau for the country's woes. What exactly is it that got 7 million people to head for advanced polling? Take a look at the key issues that Canada is basing this election on.
As Canadians head to polls, the major parties have made their final push to address some key issues. So what are they, and how are they shaping one of the most consequential elections in the country's history? One of the most important issues is the cost of living crisis, something Canada has been grappling with for years. Both the main parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives, have promised tax cuts for people in the lowest tax bracket. While Liberals are offering 1 percentage point cut, their opponents have promised to lower the rate from 15 to 12.75%. The campaigns have hinged on how the next leader would handle the trade crisis with its closest economic ally, the United States. The Conservatives have vowed tax relief for workers affected by the Trump tariffs. On the other hand, the Liberals have said they would help workers and businesses with the money raised by counter-tariffs. Another issue affecting millions is skyrocketing home prices. While the Liberals want to create a federal entity that would act as a developer for affordable housing, the Conservatives are aiming to build 2.3 million homes in Canada in the next 5 years. With primarily these issues in mind, Canadians will decide who leads their country through some troubled times. Vishal Vivek's report for NDTV World.
Look, I'm a very different person from Justin Trudeau.
And let's quickly get in a view, the vantage point from Washington at the moment with Nick Harper, who joins us live. Nick, take us through what's happening from Washington's lens. Is there a tilt towards Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre? What's the latest?
Well, a fascinating election for the United States to watch, no less because Donald Trump has made Canada so central to what he's been trying to achieve over the last 3 months, those 100 days that he's been in office, attacking Canada on multiple fronts, accusing them of letting in too many illegal migrants across the border that the US and Canada shares, accusing them of sending fentanyl across the border into the United States that then kills Americans, and of course attacking them with trade tariffs that he has placed on the US's northern neighbour. And on top of that, joking repeatedly about Canada becoming the United States' 51st state. Interesting that the two men really who are in contention of becoming the next Prime Minister, Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, both of them have differing views of Donald Trump. Both of them have attacked him repeatedly, saying that he is trying to divide Canadians. But interesting that Mark Carney seems to have been the man who's been able to capture the message better than Pierre Poilievre. He's been able to unite Canadians in the face of Donald Trump. He's the man, I guess, who's been able to capture that advantage. Because bear in mind, Poilievre's Conservatives were far and away above in the polls about 3 months ago, before Donald Trump put those tariffs in place. And then Mark Carney, capturing that message of defiance against Donald Trump, surged in the polls. But of course, Poilievre, as a Conservative, is much closer in nature to Donald Trump, a Republican. Some have compared him, saying that he is a mini Trump, both of them against woke ideologies that they say have infected both the United States and Canada. And yet it might not be the person who wins tonight's election. It might be Mark Carney, who's clearly going to be a harder concept for Donald Trump to try and deal with over the coming months. He's already proven himself in the short time that he's been Prime Minister since Justin Trudeau stood down, as someone who is fierily going to stand up for Canada's rights, for Canada's sovereignty, and for Canada's trade unity.
Nick, then, is the US viewing Mark Carney's rise as a direct pushback against Trumpism, against Trump's transactional nature and his protectionist policies?
Well, I think if Mark Carney wins tonight, there could be a question mark as to whether that could have happened if it was not for Donald Trump. We have a potential scenario here that Donald Trump is putting his stamp on a foreign government's election. Mark Carney potentially might not have stood a chance of winning, might not have stood a chance of keeping the Liberals in power for a fourth consecutive term, if it was not for the fact that Donald Trump had launched that attack on Canada, trying to get it to become the US's 51st state, and launching a whole raft of tariffs upon it. Pierre Poilievre with the Conservatives were in such a strong position because the country was disgruntled. They were unhappy with Justin Trudeau. They were unhappy of 10 years of him in power, with the Liberals fronting the country, and the Conservatives were saying it was time for change. However, when Donald Trump launched his tariff attacks, Pierre Poilievre didn't pivot to the moment in a way that Mark Carney did. Poilievre was continuing to push the idea that it was time to push the Liberals out, whereas Mark Carney was trying to unite Canadians around the threat of Donald Trump. And I think by capturing that better than the Conservatives were able to do, I think put Carney in a much stronger position. So Donald Trump, it could be argued, has potentially had a direct result on this election, especially if Carney is the victor tonight.
On that note then, Nick, is Washington also seeing Canada's election as a test case for whether democracies can actually resist the strongman politics trend?
Well, potentially, yes. And I think Donald Trump has made it very clear that he is involved in Canada, that he wants to be more closely involved in Canada. We'll find out later on tonight whether or not Canadians feel that Donald Trump is the central issue, because as we heard just a moment ago, there are a whole raft of domestic issues that Canadians care very strongly about. Everything from taxation to housing, even to climate change. It just so happens that Donald Trump has in some respects infected the election, becoming a dominant issue. We'll have to wait and see whether Canadians have decided that they are going to try and stand up to that strong man in politics, to stand up to the person that they feel is threatening their sovereignty. And I think Mark Carney, of course, has really tried to make that a rallying cry. He even said in campaigning over the weekend that Donald Trump was trying to break Canada so that America can own us. Canadians have said time and again they do not see that as a funny joke, this idea of Canadian sovereignty being expelled, of it becoming part of the United States. That joke, they say, war thin a very long time ago. And they, of course, have seen that surge in nationalistic spirit, something that Mark Carney has managed to capitalise on, and I guess in part, therefore, helped by Donald Trump and the rhetoric that he has been putting out against Canada.